There is something special about growing up in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. Heck, even in the 1950s and 60s. I believe Saturday morning cartoons started in the 1960s. Anyways, howdy folks, Super Koopa here with another Koopa Talks today. Going to be talking about the magic of Saturday morning cartoons. This is something really special to me because it was a time in my life that may not have lasted very long, being that I was born in the late 90s, or I was born in the early 90s and only experienced it from the late 90s into the early 2000s. But it was definitely something that was special. And it's something that my generation had that I don't think previous generations will ever have again unless TV makes some sort of major comeback. So picture this. You've had a long week at school. Okay? Maybe you've had several tests. Maybe you got bullied. Maybe you were dealing with all sorts of crap. And then you wake up early on Saturday morning. Now, you have to wake up early for school, and that's a bummer, but you're actually excited to wake up on Saturday morning. You're in your PJs. Maybe you take a shower. Maybe you don't. Maybe you wait till after the cartoons are done. You get your favorite breakfast cereal and drink. You sit down in front of the TV, provided it's not occupied if you lived in a one TV household. You tuned into the small stations, and you watched cartoons for, I'd say, roughly about 3 hours, most of these blocks, where I have some of them on screen. We had Fox Kids, Kids WB, and One Saturday Morning. This was the trifecta for at least the last years of the 90s into the early 2000s. Some of the names of these blocks ended up changing as time went on, and they were starting to disappear. But these are the ones I remember fondly. And, my gosh, the lineups from various years. Batman the Animated Series, X-Men, Spider-Man, on the Disney side, Mickey Mouse Works, the Winnie the Pooh show, the New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, Jungle Cubs, Tailspin, even going back further in time to pre-ABC's One Saturday Morning with shows like DuckTales and Goof Troop, back when Disney still had a spine. Just as I'm going over them, there's just so many. There's too many to even remember. You'll have to fill me in on some of the other ones you remember in the comments. But just an endless list of cartoons. And it was a time where you could just sit down, watch these cartoons, and feel good about being a kid. And it wasn't just the cartoons. It was the bumpers. It was the commercials. It was all of that. If you go and look up bumpers and commercials for ABC Kids, or rather ABC's One Saturday Morning, Kids WB, and Fox Kids, you'll find some great commercials, some great bumpers. There's a whole ton of them up on YouTube. I would definitely recommend searching them out because they are good. I thought about putting one on loop, but I've been weary of copyright ever since I tried to do that review of Ed, Edd n Eddy. There's so many of them. And you see, these are commercials that feel like they were tailor-made for kids, because they were. And the programming and the bumpers, they were colorful, they were fun, they inspired you as a kid, they made you feel special. Even if even if you were at school and you got bullied and picked on and things weren't going your way, you came home and you felt special on Saturday morning because there was a block just for you and kids like you. All kids of all ages, of all ethnicities, of all backgrounds, could all enjoy a Saturday morning cartoon. It was something special. It was a time that you can't replicate. People are saying today, well, what's the big deal? I mean, you've got kids' cartoons on their entire networks, and you've got kids' cartoons on streaming. It's not the same. Waking up at that special time to tune into something that was that special, it was an event. Watching cartoons is no longer an event. It's just something you do, and it gets, frankly, boring. I'm sure a lot of kids end up clicking off the cartoons that they watch because they're bored with a lot of the modern ones. But back in the day, I mean, this was an event. Even if you didn't really like the shows, the bumpers, the commercials, the whole thing was an event that you looked forward to every Saturday. It was a reason to look forward to Saturday, and it was the start to what was usually considered the greatest day of a kid's life, which is the weekend, Saturday and Sunday. Just a weekend of fun. For me, it was Saturday watching cartoons, and then later on we got dressed and we either did errands and went to places like Walmart, or we went to the grocery store. Sometimes we went to the local mall, and I would beg my mom to let me go when I was of age to go to the toy store, stuff like KB Toys. Anybody remember KB Toys? That was really good. The bookstore, In Rhode Island, we had Olympia Sports, which I think is still there in the old Wakefield Mall. That's where we used to go. Anybody remembers the Wakefield Mall? It was a little tiny joint there, but it was special. And what started that whole day was cartoons. It was like, this is going to be an exciting day. And maybe you saw something on TV that you would see in the stores. Maybe something was advertised on TV and you wanted to rush to the store to get it. You know, it was special. And then the next day we had church, and then we had lunch after church, and then it was just a nice relaxing weekend until you got to the drudgery of school. I hated school. I despised school with every fiber of my being. Loved history, but hated the rest of the subjects. Anywho, this was special because it was innocent. Now, again, how much was this block affected, or why did it disappear is the question. Why don't they do this anymore? Now, from what I've heard, and I don't believe it's true, so don't quote me on it, but I heard that NBC still does cartoons in the morning. I know MeTV does some cartoons, I think, in Saturday mornings, but I don't know that the major networks do them anymore. And I will tell you, there's a couple of reasons. The first primary is they ended up making kids networks. Disney Channel, Nickelodeon, and Cartoon Network all became household staples, and there was really no reason to show cartoons. CBS eventually had a block called Nick on CBS because they were both owned by Viacom, so they showed a bunch of Nick cartoons in Saturday mornings. That's cool. For people who couldn't afford cable at the time, that was really special, and that was actually later on, come to think of it. A lot of these blocks ended up transforming. Fox Kids ended up becoming the Fox box, I believe, from 2002 to 2004 or 2005. And then it became 4Kids, which we all try to forget, which is a block that consisted mostly of highly edited and censored anime, and horribly edited and censored. Does anybody remember One Piece from 4Kids or Naruto? Ugh. Yeah, I try not to. The only decent thing from that era, and I think that started in the Fox box, was Sonic X, which is funny because that'd been the first time a Sonic show had premiered, I think, since Sonic Underground, and this was way better than Sonic Underground. It was loosely based on Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, so it was a good show. But the block started changing. WB Kids went away in favor of... I think 4Kids ended up moving to CW, but eventually, or did 4Kids end up taking over WB Kids immediately? I know they took over Foxbox. They just dropped the Fox branding and went with 4Kids. I don't really remember. And then ABC, I think ABC had the strongest, because eventually they went from one Saturday morning to ABC Kids, and they were still showing. Disney still had a lot of original programming that they were putting on, a lot of original shows that ended up there. And they had a whole bunch of new original programming. ABC Kids, the rebrand kind of went for more of a sports push, because I think a lot of people were concerned that their kids were just spending too much time watching TV. For a long time, the whole TV will rot your brain thing was very prevalent throughout, especially my childhood. You know, TV will rot your... Now, we know, or at least should know by now, that that's clearly not true. It's the same as video games. It's just media. I mean, if anything, being on our phones all the time is what's rotting our brain. Yeah, how did that turn out, geniuses? Oh, I can't believe those whole old campaigns of get off the TV telling you to get off the TV and go play. Yeah, go outside and scrape your knees. That's much better than sitting in the safety of your living room and watching some nice cartoons. Great. And they were trying to combat childhood obesity, which admittedly was somewhat of a problem. Not as bad as I think that they made it out to be, but still. Childhood obesity and diabetes was definitely a concern, if nothing else. So... I understand it. And we still did play outside at that time. That's what was special. These blocks did not last all day. They only lasted for maybe 2 or 3 hours. You know, you could get 4 shows in the span of 2 hours, and you could get 6 shows in the span of 3 hours. So I believe it was at least 3 hours, possibly more than that. I really don't remember. But I do remember how special it felt. And even as the years went on and the blocks changed, it was still something special until, you know, eventually you just grow out of watching on Saturday mornings. Or maybe you don't, you know, cartoons are awesome. But they eventually started to disappear just because network TV in general just faded and the major kids networks just took over. They had that programming 24/7 because what they started to do was instead of just Saturday mornings, they started having afternoon blocks. Before the major cartoon networks, they had afternoon blocks on the lower tier, the over the air networks. You know, they had like Saturday mornings during the weekdays, or a week, some sort of branded weekday kids block. So like an hour or two in the afternoon. It wasn't as long as the Saturday mornings, so they didn't have as much time, but it was definitely, it was something special. It was a special time, and it's part of the whole magic of broadcast television as it stands. And I know a lot of people, I don't think people hate broadcast television, but they hate what they have to pay for cable and satellite, and the fact that they're, you know, they're just tired of ads, and that's why they went to streaming, even though streaming's getting ads now. Yeah, I mean, it was inevitable, but you can't escape advertisement, guys. It's just not going to happen. They're going to follow wherever it goes. They're going to follow. You're going to have advertisements in your dreams pretty soon, I guarantee you. So ads are here to stay, but they just, people don't like the being stuck to a schedule, and I get that, but there is an experience. It's like going to an event. An event is scheduled, so it feels like an event without actually having to leave your home. And my hope is that one day Saturday morning cartoons will make a comeback. These networks don't really have a whole bunch of content on them during the day. So I'd love to see them actually put some money and effort into bringing kids blocks back. I could see CW bringing back a kids WB, or, you know, Fox doing a Fox Kids, and ABC doing a, you know, a one Saturday morning again. I think that would be big news if they announced a one Saturday morning for 2023, and they said we're gonna do this block, we're gonna premiere shows on here, and then if you miss them, you can watch them again on Disney Plus or something like that. That'd be really special. That'd be a smart idea, but Disney is just Disney. So both Fox Kids and One Saturday Morning are probably dead forever. I know if I was in charge, I'd bring them back and say, let's see how they do. I mean, worst comes to worst, we just blew a lot of money on some nostalgia, but I think it'd be a smart idea. You get kids to watch a little TV again, and you'd have some interesting programming. Maybe you could start to bring more family programming back onto these single digit channels, you know, because they really, none of them really have any. And that's part of the problem, is none of these single digit channels have any family oriented programming. It's all just, the top shows for Nielsen are like Chicago Fire and all of these drama shows, these hour and a half drama shows that just drone on and on, stuff like NCIS and Good Doctor, all of that tops Nielsen. So there's no reason for them to really pursue family friendly entertainment by the looks of it, and I wish they would, because that's one of the reasons why Disney is failing, is because they're deviating away from families. So we'll have to go ahead and see what happens, but the magic of Saturday morning cartoons was, you knew that this was a safe thing to put your kids in front of. These cartoons were safe for your kids. You know, they were something that your kids could enjoy, and they learned some values, some morals. And there were all sorts of commercials, again, and bumpers in between. There was a lot of like stuff for uh, anti-drug stuff. There was all sorts of, even just the ad council. The ad council did a whole bunch of ads like be true, be kind to your neighbor, you know, hold doors open. I've still seen those on Saturday mornings when one of the networks had on that show that's been going on for a while, that Teen Kids News, and they had a whole bunch of ads from the ad council talking about holding doors open for people and kindness. I think it was something like kindness, pass it forward, or pay it forward, or something. And it was really cool to see. It was cool to see them pushing some moral values, but yes, there's not enough of it, you know. As far as with stream, how could they do something like this with streaming? The only way they could do that is with stuff like Philo TV and Sling TV, and it would still be based around the networks, you know, for people who subscribe to those services, which I would suggest you do. If you don't have cable and you want that cable-like experience, I would suggest you do that. Or stuff like Tubi and Pluto. And Warner Brothers is going to be launching their own free TV service, and I'm actually curious to see what they do with that. They've already got some channels set up on Tubi, but eventually I think what's going to happen is I don't know if they're going to leave Tubi, but eventually they're going to have their own service that they're going to launch. And I think that's going to be really interesting, because they've got a library of stuff that people really want to watch. Dude, they could launch an Ed, Edd n Eddy network, and I would be over the moon. Because when you do those types of services, usually they have Like Pluto has Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles from pretty much all eras. It just would be so cool to have like Ed and Eddie, and maybe a whole cartoon network, you know, just kind of like old cartoons, kind of like what Boomerang used to be, just a bunch of cartoons from that specific era that play one on top of the other. Oh, I'm getting myself too excited over something that doesn't actually exist, but who knows what Warner Brothers is going to do. Hopefully, if they do it right, it'll be smart, because I'm not paying for streaming services. I refuse to. You know, the day I subscribe to a streaming service will be the day the moon turns magenta. You know, so if we ever get a magenta moon, I guess I'll have to do it. But as of right now, I don't have any interest in streaming services. I have cable still, and I have antenna, and the free streaming services, but I'm not interested in the paid ones. It's just I'm not for it. I'm not for it. But this was a different time. This was, in my opinion, a better time in some ways, because, again, your kids had something safe to look forward to. They had something nice. They had something where they would learn good values. They had stuff that's memorable. You know, there are people who still, you go to any of these, I challenge you to go to any of these old collections of commercials and bumpers for these kids blocks, and to see people talking about their memories. You know, people who have kids now are talking about when they were a kid and how much they enjoyed it, which is crazy how much time has passed. But this was a magical time, and it was a magical thing. And I mean, the networks, if they wanted to, they could bring this back at any time. They really could. They could spend millions of dollars to bring it back, and bring it back in spades. And they're bringing back everything else. I don't know why they don't bring back these Saturday morning cartoon blocks and premiere shows on these. And they could dump them to streaming after, but at least premiere shows and seasons on these. It would do well for the networks. It would do well for the streaming services. I think it would be great. I think it would be really awesome. So, that's my thought on the magic of Saturday morning cartoons. I do miss the era. I'll be watching most of those old bumpers for years to come, and just remembering and reminiscing on the good times that were the late 90s, early 2000s, and even the eras I wasn't alive for. I like seeing, just because it just had a magical, nostalgic feel to it. It was really cool. And it's also just a sad reminder of how far all of these companies have fallen, especially Disney. You guys all know how I feel about Disney, so I won't dwell on it, but it's definitely not what it used to be. And I have hope that one day we could go back to something that magical, but it won't be until somebody in those boardrooms wakes up and puts something forward. So, anyways, let me know what you think. Were you alive for that time? Did you enjoy it? Do you have stories? What are your thoughts on Saturday morning cartoons and how they were, and your experiences with them, if you had any? Thank you very much for watching. This has been Super Koopa. I will see you guys next time. God bless. Have a good one. Peace.